So hi everyone. This is team 4, and we are Adam, Caitlin, Marissa, and myself, Vanya. And the topic is mental health. So the mental health encompasses of the psychological and emotional social well-being. And this is the frame. Can you go to the next slide, Marissa? So this is the framework which I am sure all of us followed about from understanding the context and going to the design phase. So the first phase is about the emotion, which talks about mainly about the research phase, which where we discussed and spoke about a research area. And then we went on to the problem reframe, where we analyzed and took interviews. And then we have the ideate phase, where we went into the design strategy and creating prototypes. And then we finally have the execution and the pilot design. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the roadmap, which I'm sure all of us are familiar with, and this is how the outline of a presentation. So the understanding the context is it talks about the problem area and the target audience. Then we have the emerging themes. Then we have the journey map, behavioral archetype, and then in the designing phase we have the design strategy, design concept, and then we have what our future work is going to hold off. Next slide. So based on our initial research, the problem we circled on was the lack of treatment barriers and resources. Then the primary stakeholder in the study are the people who believe that they would benefit from healthcare, mental health care treatment. Then we have healthcare practitioners providing services to patients will be required to conduct a research and behavior modification. And then we have the public and privately provided health insurance coverage, which also includes financial barriers playing a significant role in uh, pa- accessing patients who desire mental health care, receiving sufficient care. Next slide. So we developed 4 hypotheses from a secondary research, and but we found the third one to be the most salient in developing the rest of our project. This one focuses on reducing structural barriers, which will have greater access for mental health care for our users. Next slide. So we each of us conducted 2 remote interviews, and the research tool which we used for the cue cards, and the whole aim of conducting this interviews was coming together after our individual interviews and creating themes based on our interview sessions. And for the method we used for the cue cards, we provided our participants with cue cards of activities and influencers, which would help us understand what people or things have helped and during COVID. Now I'm going to hand over to Adam.
All right, thanks, Vanya. Here's what we did to synthesize the interview results. We used an online application called Mural, and we took the raw data from our interviews and coded them. Presented here are 2 of the main categories we used for our additional design. The accessibility issues from our interviews proved to be the most prominent, and then some of the feedback from our interviews regarding stigma also influenced how we designed our final prototype. Thank you, Marissa. Next slide, please. Some of the overarching emerging themes from that interview feedback were lack of accessibility, and that came across in 3 different ways. Physical barriers or structural barriers were a significant problem with a lot of our users in our interviews. Another accessibility concern was the process of finding a provider, given the amount of options out there, and figuring out which type of therapist was best for them, sort of like online dating. Improving accessibility was also a theme, depending on how virtual services were offered, and a way to collect and display patient feedback was recommended from our interviewees. We understood that public stigma was improving, but there appears to be a varying level of acceptance based on the perceived severity of the illness. All right, from our emerging themes, we designed a journey map for a generic user. The primary actor was someone seeking therapy, and we designed 3 categories: discovery, access, and upkeep. We decided to improve on this initial journey map and design a more detailed journey that included more specific barriers and more specific drivers. Marissa, can you show us the updated one? So the updated version includes unique drivers at every stage, as well as barriers, and then decision and action points at each inflection between stages, and a feedback loop when the therapist becomes a poor fit in the upkeep stage. The user cycles back through the entire journey map to the identification stage and access stage, where they go through finding a new therapist depending on the fit that they seek with therapy. Next slide, please. The behavioral archetype we designed for that journey map was around someone who has existing mental health issues. The barriers that occur in society compound that person's anxiety, and it creates a cycle of maladaptive behavior. The recognition that it's time to connect with a professional therapist makes it difficult to find a therapist because the current process has no transparency and accessibility is overwhelming for them. And so this just continues a negative cycle of wanting to get help but being unable to access it. Our archetype has we wanted to identify the goals, motivation, mental models, norm significance, self-image, and agency self-efficacy for this behavioral archetype, and we wanted to design a prototype around those mental concepts. Next slide, please. So using that behavior archetype and the journey map, we created this design strategy around a prototype. So within each stage, we created opportunities, decision levers, and then finally a design concept to address each of the opportunities and decision levers. Our main focus within the design concept was the discovery stage, where we wanted to address a lot of the issues with regards to identifying a therapist, whether it be through insurance mechanisms or therapy types or overall fit. We created some unique design features to include those. Then in the access stage, we provided feedback on what therapists might be best for the user in scenarios where they identified their unique mental health issues, and then created a matching system based on that. And then within the upkeep phase, we wanted to provide a continuous feedback loop following a therapy session to track user progress. Next slide, please. Within that design strategy, we wanted to identify the stakeholders. So the health insurance provider network, whether it be Medicare or Medicaid, employee assistance programs, insurance providers, and employer insurance managers all influence how our users might access mental health disciplines and or practitioners. And then on the outside of that system, we wanted to address reference networks, friends, family, colleagues, peers, and social support groups that might be an influence with outside of the healthcare professional realm. Our design process was focused on empowering users, and so we wanted to make sure that when we designed our mental health support web application, that the tool included some way to assess and capture the goals and preferences. Because our users in the research phase likened the process to dating, we wanted to prioritize a mutual fit between the patient and provider. We wanted to design a site content that informs users on various types of treatment types and assist in guiding through insurance questions relating to mental health care. So once again, we wanted to empower the users and equip them with the decisions that best improve their mental health situation.
Great. I'm going to take you through a couple of pages within our prototype. So when we first iterated on this prototype, like Adam had mentioned, we really wanted to focus on empowering and equipping the user with everything that they needed to get started on this somewhat arduous, really overwhelming process of finding a therapist. And there's a couple of lenses you could look at that through: insurance provider, personality, in terms of like virtual versus in person. There's a lot of different ways we could look at this. So I'm going to take you through our homepage, and then, as Adam mentioned, the initial assessment tool that we had crafted. So our first homepage that we had made, we wanted to keep it simple. We wanted to be sure we included inclusive language, and we wanted it to be clear that they had a few different options on this page. Of course, with the main one being, we wanted them to take this assessment to see if they could find a mutual fit, a therapist that was a good fit for them. So as you see here, we started by including a little bit of an intro. We wanted the user to feel supported and, again, empowered. Empowered is a word you're going to hear again and again, because we want them to feel like they have taken charge of this journey and that they're really in the driver's seat and getting the support that they need. And of course, there are 3 actions you'll see down here. They can start the assessment, they can explore different type of therapies, they can get more clarity around insurance types. So I'm going to take you through what the homepage looks like after the second iteration. So based on peer feedback that we had received, that was really helpful in helping us better understand how we could continue to refine and iterate on this prototype, the few key things I want to point out is that we had updated the navigation bar so that it was more thematic and that it was more informational, versus having a mixture of both task and information type of options. Another thing we wanted to do is just use language that was slightly more inclusive and supportive. And so the way we did this was, instead of characterizing things as help, we use the word fit, we use support. We don't want to intimidate a user before they even get into the assessment tool. And so that helped with that. In addition to that, we did want to highlight how this whole thing works. If this is a user's first time on the website, they might be wondering, like, what the heck do I do first? So we wanted to outline that, and you'll see here, we do outline that with just a few different steps, or pardon me, a few steps in terms of how they want to take this assessment tool. So the second page that we had prototyped was kind of this beginning of the mental health assessment tool. So we want to understand where they are, what age they are, if they're paying by insurance, if they're on Medicaid, if they are paying out of pocket. Those are things that can help indicate a therapist that would be a fit for them. So we wanted to include a way to capture that. And then, of course, a budget. Therapy, one of the things that came up in our research was that therapy is expensive. It's either not included by insurance and a huge financial burden, or it is covered by insurance, but it's not clear what insurance or anything like that. So we wanted to kind of capture that right in the very beginning so that the user can move on to really focus on their goals and preferences. And we did have just a slight change to this new assessment launch tool. You'll see here that the global nav remains the same. Again, we just wanted to be a little bit more specific that those things were more supportive and more informational versus having a mixture of task-based and information-based options. And then we did want to just indicate that we would work with a mental health professional, or probably a group of mental health professionals, to really make sure that this language was as inclusive and supportive as possible. So this instruction piece right here would probably be updated with input from them. So next, before I turn things over to Caitlin to walk you through the rest of the prototype, I want to take you through what the assessment tool actually looks like. And you'll see here, this is a little overwhelming. We knew that we had a few different things that we wanted to capture, namely goals and preferences related to therapy. But after a little bit of peer review and talking with some people from the class, we discovered that this could be seen as a little bit overwhelming. There's a lot of things listed out here and a few different information bubbles. So we really wanted to kind of hone in on the thing that would be most pertinent to them as they're filling out this form. And so with that, we did chunk out the different questions, and I'm going to show you what that looks like right now. And so first you'll see here goals. So we really honed in on goals first. This will definitely help inform what type of therapy is going to be perhaps the best fit or might be preferential for the user. And we did a sliding scale on this just to better understand what their strong preference was and what they believe would be most valuable for them, developing coping mechanisms, trying to better understand behavior patterns, and if they wanted to change any of those that might be perceived as toxic on behalf of the user in order to reach their full potential. And then of course, any sort of difficult or traumatic past events in their life. And then the second chunk with that is understanding preferences. And preferences, we broke them up into 2 pages. This one is a little bit more related to the therapy type. So do they want to be one-on-one? Do they want to be virtual? COVID has kind of exacerbated the need for therapy, and I think you see companies like Talkspace or BetterHelp that are completely virtual that have really become popular with users. So really leaning in and understanding if that's a preference for them can help inform a therapist recommendation. And then last but not least, this page really gets a little bit more granular if the user does indeed want to get more granular with things that might be helpful, indicating a potential therapy fit or a therapist fit. And the way we thought to do this is how the user processes their thoughts and feelings. If they have a specific therapist if they have a specific need or subject matter expertise that they really need help with. If the user doesn't have depression but has had eating disorders in the past, then that's going to be helpful in indicating a potential therapist that fit. And of course, we wanted to also account for any really specific granular preferences, whether it's gender or sex, ethnicity or race, or even in terms of spirituality or if they have a particular religion in mind. Things like that can really help inform a therapist fit. So we wanted to be sure to capture that. Of course, if somebody is new to this site and overwhelmed, they also don't have to check any of this. They can leave this blank. And of course, if the user were to fill this out, it would definitely help inform more specific recommendations. But we also wanted to include instructions that say, if you don't select anything here, that's okay. It just means you have no preference, and the results would return somebody who meets the initial 2 pages and the initial assessment start page. So those were the changes that were made to the assessment tool in the home page. Oh, and pardon me, this is an example of what it would look like if somebody were to click on these bubbles here. And for the next part, I'm going to kick things over to Caitlin, and she's going to walk us through the next few pieces of the prototype.
Hey, hi, this is Caitlin. So I'm going to take you guys through kind of what our results page would look like, and then a couple of other pages that we thought to have with this initial prototype. So here, this is our old assessment results page. So we really wanted to have 2 main recommendations for our users, which were a type of therapy that kind of aligned with what their assessments were telling us. And then we wanted to show the therapists that were local to them, that were in network, or accepted some sort of sliding scale if they did not have insurance. And then also make sure that those therapist recommendations aligned with what therapy types were recommended for them as well. And you can go to the next slide. However, we did receive some feedback, and I'm sorry, this is a little blurry, so I'll try and read off some of the stuff that you see here. We received feedback that some of the language that we were using there probably wasn't the most clear, and we were kind of instructed or recommended that we should have language and kind of inform the user on what they can expect from therapy and mirror the language that we were using in our assessment. So using things like you prefer X rather than Y. And so in our newer assessment results page, we decided to kind of give that drop down of what one of the therapy types would say. And so for that one, it kind of notes like your assessment suggests that you want to better understand your thoughts and behaviors, and you want to work to change those that are troubling you. So cognitive behavioral therapy was suggested, and it gives a short definition of what CBT is and how that would work in changing that person's behavior and thoughts. And it also gives a suggestion at the end, like you will learn skills to help challenge your thinking patterns, and you can expect to get homework to do between sessions. So it's just kind of more along the lines of informing and empowering our user there. We also received feedback. Oh, sorry, go back. We also received feedback that they weren't sure if our users were going to be able to save their results. And that was important to us, going back to those themes of equipping and empowering, because later down the line, if our user isn't a good fit with their therapist, they might want to go back and search for another one. And we didn't want them to have to completely do this assessment all over again. So we have the option for saving results. And then we also felt that if the user wasn't super thrilled with their results, or they were kind of confused and felt like it didn't really fit them, we wanted to also give an option to retake the assessment, which is found at the bottom of the new page. And now you can move on to the next one. So this is our therapy types page, which in the global navigation bar, and this is our old one, so we've updated this, but it should be on therapy types and not the find help one. But this was just going to be essentially a directory of all the types of therapy that are out there, so that our users could kind of information forage and learn more about therapy types themselves. You can go on to the next one. So this is our new one. I've updated to show where it is in the global navigation bar. And as Marissa said, we changed that. And then if you go on to the next one, I'll show kind of what an individual page about a therapy type would look like. So the previous kind of landing page for therapy types doesn't really encompass all of the different therapy types that are out there. So I wanted to be sure that we included a menu that kind of showed like the huge variety of therapy types that are out there. And we wanted to make sure that we were inclusive of a lot of different types of therapy. In our feedback, they were kind of confused about whether we were going to be including like more non-clinical types such as music therapy or Reiki. And so I wanted to make sure that we had a page that kind of depicted that this is supposed to be very inclusive of all of the different types of therapy that are out there. And that kind of takes us to our next steps, which we kind of decided on these main three. So as we've kind of mentioned throughout this whole thing, our main goal is to really, really ensure that accessibility and to make sure that our users are feeling supported, and that this is really honing in on how to best support mental health. And so we would really want to be able to partner with mental health professionals to make sure that they validate how our assessment tool is built out, how we're using the questions and the language, and making sure, obviously, that what our user inputs is actually fitting the recommendations that we are giving them. And then our second is we would really need to do some more research and better understand how HIPAA has implications for our tool. We didn't feel that it was explicitly applicable with the task of identifying a therapist, because there's not really a whole lot of identifying information that a user would be giving us. But if we were to kind of save those results and go into an integration with our access and upkeep stages, we would want to be sure that we are HIPAA compliant. And then our final one is just putting this out to the user and getting more user research and usability testing on how the user would use this website, and then how they would go about initiating contact with a potential therapist. We haven't really built out that part of the site in terms of booking an appointment with a therapist, since we were really more just focusing on our discovery stage rather than the access and upkeep. So we would need to do more research into how to go about that. But that's it, unless Marissa, Vanya, and Adam wanted to add anything else.
No, that's it. Thanks so much.
Caitlin.